when we talk about funding your living trust, again, as I mentioned earlier in this week, it's a scary word. It's not that scary of a process. However, it is a process and it does have some homework requirements. The biggest failure that we see with funding of a living trust is that it just doesn't get funded at all. And I don't care how good your document is. I draft fantastic 90-page revocable living trusts, but if my clients don't fund their assets into them, guess what? My fantastic living trust that they paid a good amount of money for is not going to end up doing anything for their family. So that's why at my firm we have trust funding coordinators to help our clients make sure that everything does get moved and funded properly into the trust. The biggest things we see with trust funding and how it doesn't work is they'll forget a business. Yes, we got to make sure that the trust controls any business interest. We'll see that they left things out of the trust. And in Georgia, it's really important to note that we don't have a small estate probate. So a lot of my clients will be like, I'm not going to move those two little bank accounts because they just have a couple $1,000s in them each. Guess what? If you don't move them into the trust or do a payout death beneficiary on them, then they're going to have to go through probate. And it's probably not going to be worth probating because it's going to be the same cost to probate it as it would as the money that's in it. So now this money, which it may just be a couple thousand, but I'm sure it's a couple thousand that your kids would like to have to maybe help pay for funeral expenses or whatever, is just going to be lost forever and be floating out in the ether. But that's not actually what happens. It goes to the Georgia Unclaimed Funds Department, where there's currently over 1 billion, not trillion, that's a little excessive, $1 billion in the Unclaimed Funds Department in Georgia alone. And this is money that people didn't have access to, didn't know existed, or it just wasn't worth it. So that's one of the biggest issues we see, is that they forget certain accounts or different types of property. They forget to move it into their trust, or it's not titled properly. Another thing that we see is that their trust is named one thing, and then they go to their bank, and for whatever reason, their bank chooses not to ask for the proper documentation, and they fund it into the wrong name. And I don't really know how this happens, because banks should be asking for the certification of trust to make sure that they have the name right. But I've seen that a lot. And then that trust doesn't exist. So it's not really in a trust. So always make sure that when you do a revocable living trust, number one, work with a law firm that's actually going to help you with this process. Number two, make sure that everything is titled exactly how it is on the document. And then number three, make sure that you're strategizing around what needs to be in the trust and what doesn't need to be in the trust. Again, no matter how good your trust document is, if you don't have everything properly titled or beneficiary designated, it's not going to work at the end of the day, and it's going to end up in probate court. So make sure that your trust is funded properly.